Yeah, I hope that you hearing me. This is the future, all about cybersecurity. Talking about the hackers, I'm just trying to warn you. From the one and only legend, the cyber informer. Hey, thanks for joining the podcast. Time to get it hype. This I know you gonna like, giving you some insight. They try to hack in your database, homie, not today. Thinking they can escape with your data and without a trace. Oh yeah, this is the cyber informer. Hackers, you going down like, oh yeah. This is the cyber informer. Hackers, you going down, yeah.
It's time for Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast podcast. This is episode 10, User Application Hardening. This episode is brought to you by Loyal I.T Solutions. For all of your business IT needs, visit loyalit.com.au for more information on how we can help your business. And by the Gosford Erina Business Chamber. To have your business voice heard, become a member now. Visit us at gebc.com.au. And by the Australian Federal Government. Welcome to Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast, the podcast. I am Michael Tremblett, the Cyber Informer, at cyber_informer on Twitter, and this is going to be another busy podcast. This month in the Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast initiative is User Application Hardening Month. We'll talk about last month's topic, which was restricting administrative privileges and why that's important. We'll also talk about an exciting security device called a Yubikey. I'll tell you how you can strengthen your web browser, and we'll wrap up with what's happening in the real world in the last 2 months, which includes the word that has not only had the security industry scrambling, but we've had a number of queries about it from Loyal I.T clients. The Log4j vulnerability, why it's hard to detect, and why your IT MSP can't do a thing about it. All this and more in this episode, so let's get started. Last month we didn't have a podcast, but the Cybersecurity Initiative rolled on with restricting administrative privileges. According to the Essential 8, we must restrict administrative privileges to operating systems and applications based on user duties. Regularly revalidate the need for privileges. Don't use privileged accounts for reading email and web browsing. Why? Admin accounts are the keys to the kingdom. Hackers can use these accounts to gain full access to information and systems. For more information about this, head over to our YouTube site at loyalit.com.au/YouTube and watch the video E8 Topic 6, Restrict Administrative Privileges. I do a deep dive into what administrative privileges are, and I give a demonstration of what restricting administrative privileges does. Why is it important to restrict administrative privileges? Pure and simple, it is important to restrict administrative privileges to minimize the damage caused by unauthorized or accidental installation of malware. There are two main classes of user. One is a domain user, which is a user that is configured on a server and can log on to any computer across the network. And the other is a local user, which is a user that is configured on each individual workstation. Each user type can be standard or administrative. A standard user has limited access to change settings or install software, and an administrative user has unrestricted access to change settings or install software. Given these descriptions, the standard user is the more secure. However, it can cause problems for the end user when updates are available for software products, or if settings need to change on a workstation, because in most cases you will either need to run updates as an administrator account or log in as an administrator account. I go into detail in the video how to restrict administrative privileges on your PC over at loyalit.com.au/YouTube. If you are an administrative account, then you'll be allowed to install software or make changes to the system with little to no resistance from Windows. This will also mean malware will have little to no resistance when trying to install itself on a workstation. Even worse is if you have administrative access to the wider network. Malware can be programmed to try and move from one computer to another, and if there are no restrictions on the network, it can move with ease, making malware containment very difficult. The other aspect of restricting privileges is to regularly revalidate the need for privileges. This is relevant for both internal networks and your cloud products such as Microsoft 365 SharePoint, Google Drive, Dropbox, and others. If you don't frequently revalidate permissions, you will be allowing users access to sensitive information which they may not necessarily need to do their job. This method of access control is called least privilege. In other words, allows users just enough access to computers and files that will allow them to do their job. For example, the sales team doesn't need access to the accounting system, so they should be blocked from being able to access accounts files. Same with user accounts. If they don't need to be an administrative account, make them a standard user. Keeping track of who has access to what is difficult to say the least. The Essential 8 recommends an annual Network Resource Access Audit. This amounts to an annual review of active user accounts, what access they have to the company data, and what accounts and groups have access to which files and folders. This is not something the typical user or manager will be able to do by themselves. Normally, it will be done in conjunction with your IT managed services provider. The IT team will likely print reports of active users, groups, and folder permissions, and sit down with management to work out who should have access to what. It is a laborious task. However, it is important to make sure restrictions to different departments' data are maintained. What if reception was inadvertently given access to the company payroll? You may not know of this error until a Network Resource Access Audit is performed. To summarize these points, don't give users access to anything more than what they need to perform their jobs, and audit these permissions frequently. As mentioned at the top of the show, in the last few months, I've been using a security product which is not new, but it can bring a new level of security to your network and cloud services. If you've been following along with the Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast Academy, you will have seen the video series over the Christmas and New Year period that have focused on a cool technology called Yubikey. Yubikey is a USB dongle, slightly smaller than your typical USB flash drive. What's unique about Yubikey? Well, your Windows computer or Mac can be configured to not log in without a Yubikey being plugged into your computer. Yubikey caters for many different situations. Check out the Academy for the how-to videos on Yubikey. This technology brings multi-factor authentication to not only your Windows or Mac computer logins, but the same key can be used to log into your web services too, where supported. You can use the Yubikey to log into your workstation, domain user account, or your Mac workstation and Microsoft 365 account. All of these scenarios are covered in the Academy. Some of these implementations are easy. However, some, such as implementing on your domain network, are difficult to implement. But this is a small price to pay for absolutely impenetrable user access security to workstations. How does it work, you may ask? I've been using Yubikey for all of these scenarios for months now, and it really is as simple as plugging in your key and entering your PIN. Each key is programmed with your credentials, and you are issued a PIN. If you get the PIN incorrect 7 times by default, it will lock and your administrator will need to reset it. In order to log into your workstation, you must first plug in your key. If you don't plug in your key, there is no other way to access your workstation. So this is the something you have in the multi-factor authentication paradigm. Think of it like your ATM card. You can't withdraw money from an ATM without putting your card in the machine first. Plug in your Yubikey and you'll be presented with a prompt asking for something you know, aka your PIN. Enter your PIN, and if you get it correct, you will then be prompted to press the Yubikey before you can log in. This press of the key is not a fingerprint scanner, although you can get Yubikeys that can do fingerprint scanning if you wish. The press of the key is to thwart malware masquerading as your Yubikey. The press ensures that you are actually on the computer. This is pretty ingenious, and like the properly implemented multi-factor authentication, it is bulletproof, and due to the touch aspect, it cannot be spoofed or bypassed by software. On a technical level, it uses a well-defined standard called Personal Identity Verification, or PIV. It is so secure that the US federal government uses PIV credentials to access federally controlled facilities and information systems. This works by writing an X509 Public Key Infrastructure, or PKI, digital certificate to your Yubikey, which is in essence your identity on your computer or network. Digital certificates are used by your bank to secure your personal banking. This uses a similar technology. Using digital certificates to secure connections and validate credentials are considered the strongest form of security. I remember for the longest time the Australian Tax Office had a clunky system of installing your digital certificate in the web browser to secure access to your business account. This is exactly that technology, but in an easy-to-use key. On a basic level, the way the digital certificate works for authentication is that you have 2 certificates. One is called a private key, one is called a public key. Anything that is encrypted with your private key can only be decrypted by your public key, and vice versa. Your Yubikey will contain your private key, and in the truest sense of the word, it must remain private. The server will contain your public key, which means anyone can have it. It doesn't matter. If you're following along, this means that anything encrypted with the server's public key can only be decrypted by the Yubikey's private key. In the simplest sense, anything encrypted on the server can only be decrypted by the Yubikey. In a very watered down version of the way digital certificates work with logging into a network, you will trigger the login process by inserting the Yubikey and entering the correct PIN. The workstation will contact the server saying, "I want to log in." The server will encrypt a message using your public key and send it back to the workstation. Remember, anything encrypted with your public key can only be decrypted by your private key, which is stored on your Yubikey. The workstation will use the private key on the Yubikey to decrypt the message, answer the challenge with a response, sign and encrypt the response with the private key, and send that back to the server. The server will use the public key to decrypt the communication and validate the signed message, which can only be produced by the valid private key. And if the signed challenge response is correct, the server will log you in. As the challenge response can only have been generated by the private key on your Yubikey, your identity is confirmed and you are logged in. Okay, we got a little technical there, but if you couldn't follow along, it's because there were quite a few references to public and private keys. Just know it's a well-defined standard and considered unbreakable. The system has another cool advantage. As your identity is stored on your Yubikey, if the server was compromised by a hacker, the server only contains your public key, and as mentioned, anyone can have your public key, so who cares? As long as they don't get your private key, which is safely locked away on your Yubikey behind your PIN code. In other words, there is nothing of value a hacker can get from your server if it uses this login technology, because the keys are designed to be public anyway. Unlike servers storing passwords can then be exfiltrated from your server if the server is compromised. So the server is trusted to hold your secrets, where this changes the paradigm where you are trusted to hold your secret. The server has nothing of value to a hacker. And another side effect of this, which makes it even more secure, is that there is no feasible way to compute a matching private key from a given public key with today's technology. There is a potential for quantum computers to be able to do this, but that technology is likely many years away, and there are already developments in public key technology which is believed to be quantum secure, so even quantum computers can't break it. I'm not expecting this technology to be needed in my working lifetime, so it is not something we need to worry about right now. That's for the next generation of security experts to worry about. So for a final word on Yubikey, if you want secure login to your network or cloud services, use a Yubikey. The keys start at around $30 Australian each. However, the one that can do workstation logins and cloud services logins are approximately $75 Australian each. It's absolutely worth the capital expenditure for US federal government trusted security for your small or medium business. Now let's move on to our main topic of the podcast, User Application Hardening. We'll concentrate on the web browser, and boy, what a diverse topic this is. We can harden the browser for privacy and confidentiality. In the Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Academy on February 21, 2022, I will be releasing a video which steps you through all of the topics I'll touch on now and show you how to implement them in the major browsers Edge, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. There are a number of different ways to harden your browser, and we won't touch again on password managers and ad blocking. These are more about settings within the browser and are off by default and may impact on the end user experience. And we don't want to upset the end user, do we? Microsoft has studied what vulnerabilities there are in Chromium-based browsers, such as Chrome and Edge, and found that around 50% of the vulnerabilities are in the handling of JavaScript. Java and JavaScript are completely different things. Modern browsers these days don't support Java, but they all support JavaScript. There is a compiler in the browser called Just-in-Time, or JIT, which speeds up websites with JavaScript on them. These days you'll be hard-pressed finding a site that doesn't use JavaScript. So, Microsoft have created Super Duper Secure Mode, which turns off this JIT compiler. The downside is that you may find some websites don't load as quickly as they used to. I've been using it for over a month now and have not noticed a difference. So, the trade-off between security and speed in this case is a no-brainer. 50% less vulnerabilities and no noticeable difference. If you use Edge, you can enable Super Duper Secure Mode by going into Settings, click on Privacy, Search and Services, scroll down to Enhance Your Security on the Web section and select Strict. You'll be instantly more secure. Super Duper Secure Mode is not available on any other browser except for Edge. Tracking prevention is available in Edge, Firefox, and Safari. This prevents third-party websites from tracking you by stating you do not want to be tracked. Tracking is usually used by advertising companies to profile you. Notice I didn't mention Google Chrome in the list of browsers that tracking prevention is available in. Google Chrome doesn't have this option as their business model relies on tracking and profiling you to serve you relevant ads. Should you be thinking about a change from Chrome to another browser that respects your privacy more? Third-party cookies. Going hand in hand with tracking protection is disabling third-party cookies. cookies. Cookies are used to maintain a session to a website. So once you have a session, these cookies can be used to track you on websites that are not the first-party website you are on. For example, let's say you sign into Facebook. Your computer will have a Facebook cookie added to your browser. Now, if you're surfing to xyz.com and it so happens to have a Facebook thumbs up icon on the page, Facebook will know you've been there because that thumbs up will call the now third-party Facebook cookie, keeping in mind the first party is now xyz.com, and send that information to Facebook. This information creates a profile of you so they can target ads based on your browsing habits. Disabling third-party cookies is a great way to prevent this sort of tracking. Many websites use this technology, including Google. Clearing browser data on exit. In all browsers except Safari, you can clear data that has accumulated in your browser each time you close it. Data categories that can be cleared are browsing history, download history, cookies and other site data, cached images and files, passwords, autofill form data, and site permissions. The most important option is to clear cookies on exit. A third party can't track you if you don't have their cookie on your computer. The downside is that you'll need to log back into websites each time you visit them after closing your browser because their cookie will no longer be present in your browser, which maintains your login to the websites. Clearing other items such as passwords or browsing history will increase your privacy if someone else uses your login on your computer. DNS over HTTPS or DOH or DO is a technology we haven't covered yet. DNS is how your web browser converts a human-readable website you type into your web browser to its computer-readable IP address. For example, loyalit.com.au's website IP address is 13.55.222.232. This is done transparently and quickly in the background every time you go to a website. These DNS requests historically have been in clear text, meaning anyone between your browser and the DNS server, which is typically run by your ISP unless you specifically change it, can see the data. ISPs and other services have found a way to profile and spy on you using your DNS requests. Some have also been known to inject their own ads into your browser. Viewing and editing DNS requests is very powerful, so it is important to protect them. It is also a popular way for web filtering to work too. DNS over HTTPS encrypts these DNS requests, which thwarts many spying and filtering efforts. The DNS server you use will see your DNS requests, but everyone in between will not, and that's what we're protecting against. Most browsers now support DNS over HTTPS, but you need to turn it on because it can cause some issues if you have an internal server that you need access to by your web browser. You'll find that there are currently 5 options: Google, OpenDNS, Quad9, Cloudflare, or Clean Browsing. Historically, I've used Cloudflare because they were first to market and they promised to respect your privacy. I've been using DNS over HTTPS for over a year now and I haven't had any issues and I feel much more secure for it. Microsoft has set June 15, 2022 as the end of life for Internet Explorer. Recently, Windows 10 and 11 have decoupled Internet Explorer from the operating systems to the point where it can now be uninstalled. In the past, this has not been allowed because Internet Explorer has been built into Windows. Thankfully, that is no longer the case and you can now go in and uninstall it. I highly recommend that you do. Auto-update browsers. As we've talked about in the past, automatic updates are important as installing updates keeps you safe by closing security holes as soon as updates are released. Edge and Chrome do this automatically, but we may have to enable automatic updating on Firefox and Safari. The soon-to-be-released video in the Academy will show you how to ensure your browsers are updating themselves. Now let's move on to what happened in the real world in the last 2 months. It seems what's old is new again. A massive story that broke in December was the Log4j or Log4Shell vulnerability rated a CVE of 10 out of 10. We talked about CVEs, or common vulnerabilities and exposures, back in the video E8 Topic 3, Patch Operating Systems. As a refresher, every vulnerability gets a ranking from 1 to 10 in terms of criticality. A 10 out of 10 is as bad as it gets. It means it can lead to a complete takeover of unpatched web servers. I say what's old is new because this is a similar vulnerability which led to Anna Cruikshank's personal data being leaked from Equifax back in 2017. For those who have not listened to podcast episode 6, go back and listen to what she has been going through since her identity had been stolen since the data leak. This Log4Shell vulnerability is a vulnerability in the Apache web server software in a Java-based logging library widely used by many products. This log4shell vulnerability is a vulnerability in the Apache web server software in a Java-based logging library widely used by many products. The flaw is a remote code execution vulnerability that allows an attacker to run code of their choice on an affected server. This means that an attacker doesn't require physical access in order to run arbitrary code that could lead to complete control over affected systems and the theft of sensitive data. Log4j is an open source server logging Java framework. Its job is to log things that happen on a Java server, like the contents of form submissions, for example. Many sites just log everything in case it might be useful after the fact, and it often is handy for troubleshooting and forensics. A passive logging tool just logs events and doesn't look at what they are. Events are just written to a file for the administrator to view. However, what if it wasn't passive, but instead they were actively interpreting the contents of what was being logged? And that content comes from outside, meaning it could be manipulated by an attacker simply by providing something that gets logged. This is in essence what the log4j vulnerability is. Sadly, there is no way to detect this because your software product may use log4j and log everything. It may only log portions of the website or application, or it may not use log4j at all. Without being the website or applications programmer, the only way to test if it is vulnerable is to go to any place on your website and send a maliciously crafted line of text to see if it is executed. Not easy. So the only real solution is to contact your website administrator or your application developer and ask them if they are vulnerable. And if they are, to provide you with an update that is not vulnerable. Unfortunately, it is no use asking your IT MSP to check if your application is vulnerable, as they more than likely didn't write your applications nor develop your website. They will not be able to help. So this can be a real tough situation for both MSPs and people who use these applications because there is no quick, simple way to determine if you're vulnerable. Now we'll move on to another subject that's popped up in December. As many of Loyal I.T's clients now use Microsoft 365 as their email system, this doesn't apply to them, so it is more of an amusing report due to the unconventional kludge Microsoft had to create to fix the problem. Microsoft broke Microsoft Exchange servers around the world, which rendered Microsoft Exchange servers inoperable because they could not recognize the year 2022 in what some people are calling Y2K22. There is an incredibly complex explanation about how Microsoft Exchange stores dates, which is in essence what has happened here. How did Microsoft fix it? They sent out a patch update which servers could understand where the date was set to December 33rd, 2021. Yep, December 33rd. All updates from now on, if you look under the bonnet, will be a December 2021 date. So future updates will be December 60th, 2021. December 75th, 2021, and so on. This sort of kludge happens all the time in IT, but it is really weird when one of the biggest tech companies in the world has to do something like this just to get their systems online again. Normally, at this time, we would talk about how many updates there have been for Windows to date. But as there has only been one Patch Tuesday this year so far, let's have a look at the final tally for patch updates for 2021. Windows updates patched a total of 958 vulnerabilities. 102 of these were critical and 24 were known to be exploited. So if the message hasn't been abundantly clear in the past, you need to be ensuring your computer systems are being updated as soon as patches are available. If you haven't been updating, you could be left vulnerable by any one of these 958 Windows vulnerabilities. So let's move on to this month's challenge. Last time I issued you a challenge to turn off your macros if you don't use them. If you haven't done it, why not? It's super easy. This month, we'll harden your web browser. Shortly, we will release a video in the Academy on how to do this on the major browsers, Edge, Chrome, Firefox and Safari. There are a number of different settings to enable, so it may take a few minutes depending on which browser you use. Check out the video in the Academy and harden your browser's security and privacy today. Okay, let's finish this up. Sadly, we are having to postpone our live events at Julie's Place in the coming months due to the COVID Omicron variant running rampant. We will no longer be holding events on February 23 and March 30. We were very much looking forward to these events as we had lined up keynote speakers from the Joint Cybersecurity Centre in Sydney who were going to be presenting on cybersecurity related issues to small and medium businesses in our region. We will postpone these to a future date. Please keep your eyes open for more details and I'll update you on a future podcast. Thanks for listening. Head over to Facebook and follow our page at facebook.com/CSBCAPCC. Follow our other pages as well at CSBCAPCC on Twitter, which will keep you updated on everything cybersecurity, business, connect and protect Central Coast related. You can also follow my Twitter account, which is at cyber_informer. Thanks to the federal government, the content on the Cybersecurity Academy is now free for all. Head over to loyalit.com.au/academy to sign up. We also have a YouTube channel. Visit loyalit.com.au/YouTube to view all of the great content. Next month in the Academy, we'll look at application control. To do this manually is a nightmare, but there are some cool products that will make management of application control much easier. We'll look at these products and I'll do a rundown of what the perfectly secure business is. A quick reminder that the Gosford Arena Business Chamber has a new podcast called Open Chamber. If you do business on the Central Coast and want to be kept up to date with what's happening in the business world, this podcast is for you. Search Open Chamber on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or visit gebc.com.au/podcast to listen. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the podcast using your favourite podcatcher and follow us on social media. Until next time, stay safe online.
Oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down like, oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down, yeah.